What if the FBI's Behavioral Analyst Unit walked into Miami Metro homicide during Dexter Morgan's 12-year run as the Bay Harbor Butcher? What would their profile say? What boxes would he check? And more importantly, what would their assessment reveal about Dexter that even he doesn't fully understand about himself? In this video, we're running Dexter Morgan through the actual profiling system the FBI uses to hunt serial killers. We're pulling from the FBI's Crime Classification Manual, their 2008 report on serial murder, real BAU methods used at Quantico, and specific scenes from the Showtime series to build the psychological profile that would have ended up on a whiteboard at the FBI's National Center for Analysis of Violent Crime. By the end, you'll see Dexter Morgan the way a federal profiler would, and it's not exactly what the show tells you to think. An FBI profiler would immediately classify Dexter Morgan as an organized, mission-oriented serial killer with above-average intelligence who operates inside law enforcement, one of the rarest and most dangerous profiles in their system. The organized-disorganized distinction emerged from early FBI behavioral research and was formalized in the Crime Classification Manual. Organized killers plan their crimes carefully, bring weapons and restraints to the scene, transport the body, clean up evidence, and follow media coverage of their own cases. Disorganized killers act on impulse, use whatever's available at the scene, leave the body where they killed, and don't plan escape routes. Dexter Morgan hits every single organized marker. In Season 1, Episode 1, the pilot, we watch him stalk Mike Donovan, a choir director who murdered young boys. Dexter researches him for weeks before making contact. He breaks into Donovan's house ahead of time to scout the location. He brings pre-cut plastic wrap, his own knives, duct tape, sedatives, and his blood slide kit. After the kill, he cuts up the body, carries the parts by boat, and dumps them in the Gulf Stream where ocean currents scatter remains across hundreds of miles. He bleaches down his kill room. Minimal recoverable forensic evidence linking the crimes to him gets left behind. Earlier FBI profiling frameworks, including those popularized by Ressler and Douglas, categorize serial killers as visionary, responding to voices or visions, hedonistic, killing for pleasure, power, control, dominating victims, and mission-oriented, eliminating a specific group as they see as undesirable. Dexter doesn't hear voices. His killings are not sexually motivated. He doesn't torture victims for the sake of watching them suffer. What he does is hunt people he's decided deserve to die based on a strict moral code. That's mission-oriented. Robert Ressler, the FBI agent who literally coined the term serial killer and co-founded the BAU, wrote in his book, Whoever Fights Monsters, that mission-oriented killers often have a pseudological justification system that makes perfect sense to them internally. Dexter's Code of Harry is exactly that. A rationalized framework that turns murder into justice in his own mind. Here's the part that makes Dexter especially dangerous from a profiling standpoint. He works inside the system. The BAU's research shows that serial killers with law enforcement ties, cops, security guards, former military, use their insider knowledge to avoid detection far longer than civilians. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, had employment connected to security systems and later worked as a compliance officer. Joseph D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, was a cop during his crime spree. All of them used their access to stay ahead of investigations. Dexter Morgan is a blood spatter analyst for Miami Metro Homicide. He has direct access to active case files, forensic databases, evidence logs, and the people investigating murders in his own jurisdiction. In Season 2, when the Bay Harbor Butcher case heats up and Lundy's task force closes in, Dexter uses his position to track exactly what evidence they have, what leads they're following, and how close they're getting. He literally sits and rethinks about his own murders. Based on FBI behavioral frameworks, organized crime scenes point to planning control and intelligence. Organized killers tend to have higher IQs, stable employment, relationships that look normal on the surface, and the ability to present a completely functional version of themselves to the world. Dexter's IQ is never stated directly, but context clues put it well above average. He holds a forensics degree, works a specialized technical job that requires understanding chemistry and physics, and outsmarts basically everyone around him for over a decade. The mission-oriented classification matters because it affects how profilers would predict his future behavior. Mission-oriented killers operate on a schedule tied to opportunity and justification. They don't stop until the mission is complete, or they get caught. Dexter's mission is to get rid of people who've escaped justice. As long as criminals keep existing, his target pool never runs out. Using established profiling methodology, Dexter's crime scenes would identify him as organized, intelligent, mission-driven, and embedded in law enforcement within the first few case reviews. This combination would place him among the most difficult offenders to detect, because he's not just hard to catch, he's built his entire life around never getting caught in the first place. Before we continue, if you're finding this breakdown as chilling as it is fascinating, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. The organized classification is one thing, but there's a second piece of the FBI system that tells profilers even more about who they're hunting. And when you run Dexter through that lens, the profile gets a lot darker. Dexter Morgan's victim selection pattern would signal to an FBI profiler that he's operating under a compensatory psychological model, using controlled kills to manage internal instability caused by deep childhood trauma. The FBI's profiling methods pay close attention to victimology, who the killer picks, why he picks them, and what the pattern reveals about his psychological needs. Victim selection isn't random, it's personal, even when the killer never met the victim before. Let's map out who Dexter actually kills across the series. Season 1, Mike Donovan, a choir director who murdered boys. His brother, Brian Moser, in the finale. Season 4, Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer. Season 5, multiple members of the rape and murder gang. Season 7, Hector Estrada, the man who ordered his mother's murder. Season 8, Saxon, the serial killer working with Vogel. Pattern recognition is FBI's bread and butter. In Dexter's case, the pattern is crystal clear. He hunts killers. Specifically, he hunts people who got away with killing or will kill again if not stopped. What brings his targets together is guilt. They're people he's proven, at least to himself, have murdered and escaped punishment. The Crime Classification Manual talks about compensatory killers, offenders who use murder to restore a sense of power or control they feel lost in other areas of life. Former FBI profiler John Douglas, who interviewed dozens of serial killers for the Bureau and wrote Mindhunter, explained that compensatory types often have histories of childhood trauma that left them feeling helpless. The kills become a way to rewrite that script and put themselves in the power position. Dexter's original story is laid out clearly in Season 1, Episode 11, Truth Be Told, and expanded in Season 3. At age 3, his mother Laura Moser was murdered with a chainsaw inside a shipping container by drug dealers as punishment for being a confidential informant. Dexter and his brother Brian were locked in that container with her body and were left trapped in the container for an extended period before being discovered. In the show's timeline, this is October 1973. Harry Morgan, the lead detective on the scene, found Dexter sitting in a pool of blood, silent and traumatized. That's confirmed PTSD-level childhood trauma by any clinical standard. An FBI profiler reading Victimology would spot something else. Dexter's victims mirrored the crime that created him. His mother was murdered by criminals who thought they were above the law. Dexter hunts criminals who got away with murder and act like they're untouchable. He's not killing random people. He's symbolically killing the men who killed his mother, over and over, with every target that he straps to a table. The compensatory model fits when you add the rest of the behavioral evidence. Compensatory killers aren't typically sexually motivated. Dexter's killings are not sexually motivated. They tend to be highly ritualistic. Dexter's kill ritual is identical every single time, down to the plastic wrap pattern and the specific cheek he takes the blood slide from. An FBI profiler would also note the control factor. Dexter doesn't just kill, he completely dominates the scenario. His victims wake up, held down, wrapped in plastic, surrounded by photos of their own crimes. He makes them admit what they did. He explains why they're going to die. Then he kills them in a controlled, deliberate, almost clinical way. That level of ritual control is a trauma response. He's recreating the powerlessness he felt as a child and flipping it. This time, he's the one in control, and the bad guy is the one who's helpless. Dexter's victim selection would tell an FBI profiler that they're dealing with a compensatory mission process hybrid who's symbolically reenacting and reversing his own childhood trauma with every kill. That's not the profile of a random lunatic. That's the profile of someone whose violence has deep psychological roots that were never treated. Before we go further, drop a comment and let me know. Do you think Dexter kills are actually about justice, or are they just about control? I want to hear your take. We covered what the crime scenes say and what the victims reveal, but the FBI doesn't stop there, because the most predictive part of a profile comes from what the offender does after the murder. Dexter Morgan's post-offense conduct, particularly his trophy collection, his integration into the investigation process, and his documented inability to stop killing, would tell FBI profilers that he's psychologically dependent on murder and would never stop voluntarily. The FBI's behavioral analysis framework separates what happens during the crime from what happens after. Post-offense behavior includes body disposal, trophy taking, revisiting the crime scene, following media coverage, and inserting themselves into the investigation. These behaviors reveal the psychological payoff the killer is getting from the murder. Let's start with the blood slides. After every kill, Dexter takes a blood sample from his victim's right cheek and preserves it on a glass slide. He stores these slides in a wooden box hidden in his air conditioner. By season 2, he has dozens of slides. By season 4, after killing Arthur Mitchell, he's built up years' worth. Trophy taking is one of the clearest behavioral signatures the FBI tracks. Wrestler and Douglas both wrote extensively about it. Killers take trophies, jewelry, driver's licenses, photos, body parts, recordings, because the actual murder doesn't satisfy them long term. The high fades, the memory becomes less vivid. The trophy is something they can return to, hold, look at, and use to relive the experience. Dexter's blood slides serve that exact function. In season 1, episode 4, Let's Give the Boy a Hand, he opens his box and looks through his slides when he's feeling the urge to kill, but can't act on it yet. The slides aren't evidence he's worried about. He keeps them intentionally, carefully, in a location he controls. They're souvenirs, trophies, proof that the dark passenger was fed. Then there's the investigation insertion. One of the rarest and most dangerous behavioral patterns the FBI tracks is when an offender directly involves themselves in the investigation of their own crimes. Dennis Rader sent letters to the police and media for decades. BTK wanted the recognition. He wanted people to know what he'd done and how smart he was. Dexter doesn't send letters, but he does something even more brazen. He works the cases in season 2. The entire Bay Harbor Butcher arc shows Dexter actively participating in the investigation of his own murders. He's in the briefings. He processes evidence. In episode 7, That Night a Forest Grew, he plants evidence to frame Dokes. In episode 11, Left Turn Ahead, he manipulates the investigation to protect himself. He's not just following the case in the news, he's steering it from the inside. An FBI profiler would recognize this immediately as need for recognition behavior combined with superiority complex. Dexter doesn't just want to kill and get away with it. He wants to be smarter than the people hunting him. Now, let's talk about the inability to stop. One of the key questions the FBI asks when profiling serial offenders is, can this person quit? Dexter tries to stop multiple times across the series, and fails every time. Season 2, after Rita and the kids almost discover what he is, Dexter swears he's done killing. By the end of the season, he's killed again. Season 6, after killing Travis Marshall, he wonders if he's finally free of the dark passenger. Season 7 opens with him killing someone new. That dependency would be flagged immediately by profilers as a sign that he will not stop unless forced to stop by external circumstances, arrest, death, or incapacitation. Post-offense behaviors where the FBI separates casual criminals from true serial offenders, taking trophy signals that the murder itself isn't enough, inserting into investigations signal ego and need for recognition. Repeated attempts to quit that all fail signals psychological dependency beyond conscious control. If the FBI built a profile from the Bay Harbor Butcher crime scenes without knowing who the killer was, these behaviors would lead them to predict white male, 30 to 40s, above average intelligence, works in forensics or law enforcement, experienced emotional trauma in childhood, mission-oriented with compulsory elements, will not stop killing voluntarily, takes trophies, and monitors investigations. That profile describes Dexter Morgan almost perfectly. Dexter's post-offense conduct would tell FBI profilers everything they need to know about his future risk. He's psychologically incapable of stopping. He's collecting proof of his crimes instead of destroying it, and he's embedded in the system hunting him. That's the profile of someone who will keep killing until he's caught or dead, which is exactly what happens in Dexter New Blood. An FBI profiler would identify Dexter Morgan as a trauma-conditioned offender whose violence is driven by maladaptive coping mechanisms developed in early childhood and reinforced across decades. Modern FBI profiling doesn't just look at behavior. It incorporates neuroscience and developmental psychology to explain why offenders think the way that they do. The BAU works with psychiatrists, neurologists, and trauma specialists to build comprehensive psychological profiles. Let's go back to the core trauma event. Dexter witnessed his mother's brutal chainsaw murder at age 3 and was left trapped in a container for an extended period. Research shows that trauma experienced before age 5, especially trauma involving a primary caregiver's violent death, fundamentally rewires the developing brain's threat response systems. The amygdala, which processes fear and emotional memory, becomes hyperactive. The prefrontal cortex, which handles impulse control and decision-making, shows reduced connectivity. Dexter's dark passenger, the concept he uses to describe the urge to kill, maps directly onto dissociation, a documented trauma response where parts of the mind split off to handle unbearable experiences. The show gradually reframes it as Dexter's own need that he's externalized to create psychological distance. Either way, it's a coping mechanism born from trauma that was never treated. Harry Morgan's response to discovering Dexter killing neighborhood animals at age 7 was to bring in Vogel and create the Code of Harry instead of getting his adopted son actual psychiatric help. In season 8, episode 11, Monkey in a Box, Vogel admits to Dexter that she and Harry made him what he is, that they channeled his violence instead of trying to heal it. Harry saw a damaged kid and decided the damage was permanent. So instead of therapy, counseling, medication, or trauma treatment, he taught Dexter how to kill efficiently. The FBI's 2008 serial murder report specifically addresses the mythology that serial killers are born, not made. The report states clearly, there is no single identifiable cause or factor that leads to the development of a serial killer. Rather, there are a multitude of factors that contribute to their development. Childhood trauma, abuse, neglect, and inappropriate role models are all identified as significant contributing factors. Here's what a forensic neuropsychologist consultant working with the FBI might flag in Dexter's profile: early childhood trauma, dissociative coping mechanisms, inappropriate mentorship, Harry teaching him to kill instead of heal, lack of proper psychiatric intervention, and decades of reinforced maladaptive behavior. An FBI profile would likely describe Dexter as a trauma-conditioned offender. His violence isn't biologically inevitable. It's the result of a catastrophic trauma met with catastrophic mismanagement. The brain science backs this up. Trauma rewires the developing brain. Disassociation is a survival response to unbearable experiences. Reinforced maladaptive coping becomes locked-in behavior over time. The code of Harry is what an FBI analyst might call enabling criminal methodology. Harry didn't create Dexter's urge to kill. The trauma did that. But Harry did teach him how to pick victims, how to avoid evidence, how to cover his tracks, and how to rationalize murder as justice. Without the code, Dexter might have ended up in psychiatric care, medicated in therapy, working through his trauma like thousands of other PTSD survivors. With the code, he ended up as the Bay Harbor Butcher. An FBI profiler running Dexter Morgan through modern behavioral analysis augmented with neuroscience would conclude that his violence is trauma-driven, his methodology is learned, and his inability to stop is the result of decades of reinforcement without intervention. He is not a natural-born killer. He's a case study in what happens when a traumatized child is given a murder manual instead of a therapist. If the FBI's behavioral analysis unit compiled everything we've covered into a formal profile, it would describe Dexter Morgan as one of the most dangerous offender types in their classification system, and one of the most preventable. Let's build the actual profile summary the way that the BAU formats them. The offender classification would be organized, mission-oriented serial killer with compensatory and process-oriented elements, embedded within law enforcement structure. The victimology would be targeting individuals that the offender has identified as unpunished killers. Victim selection is highly specific and morally rationalized. There is no sexual component. Crime scene behavior would be extensive pre-offense planning, controlled kill environment, complete victim restraint, ritual confirmation including forced admission of guilt, clinical method of killing, systematic body disposal designed to prevent recovery and identification, minimal recoverable forensic evidence linking crimes to the offender. The post-offense conduct would be along the lines of trophy collection, in this case blood slides, maintained and revisited, active insertion into the investigation process using law enforcement access, documented inability to cease offending despite multiple attempts, maintains ritual consistency rather than escalating in sadism. Then there are the psychological drivers: severe early childhood trauma, in this case witnessed murdered mother at age 3, and prolonged exposure to the scene. Dissociative coping mechanisms, maladaptive mentorship structure replacing proper psychiatric intervention, violence functioning as psychological regulation mechanism tied to unresolved trauma. And the last thing would be risk assessment. The offender would not stop voluntarily. Given decades of entrenched behavior, behavioral change would be extremely difficult. Offenders' access to law enforcement systems and forensic knowledge makes standard investigative approaches high risk for compromise. That's the profile, and here's what makes it devastating. Nearly everything in that summary was preventable. If Dexter had been placed in trauma therapy at age 3 after being found in the shipping container, the dissociative response might have never calcified into a separate, dark passenger identity. If Harry had taken him to child psychologists instead of deciding on his own that his son was a lost cause, the urge to kill might have been processed, understood, and managed through healthy outlets. The FBI's report on serial murder emphasizes that early intervention with at-risk youth can prevent development of violent behavior patterns. Dexter Morgan is the case study for what happens when intervention doesn't occur. Harry's code didn't save Dexter from becoming a killer, it made him into one with professional-grade methodology. An FBI profile of Dexter Morgan would read as a warning label for the entire criminal justice and mental health system. You can't diagnose a 3-year-old as beyond saving. You can't replace therapy with a murder code. You can't teach someone to kill efficiently and expect them to stop on their own. Dexter's entire trajectory was avoidable. and that makes his body count a systemic failure, not an inevitability. Across 8 seasons of Dexter, Dexter New Blood, and Dexter Resurrection, the FBI's behavioral analysis framework paints a clear picture. Dexter Morgan is an organized, mission-oriented serial killer whose violence is rooted in severe childhood trauma that was managed through reinforcement instead of treatment. His high intelligence, law enforcement access, and psychological dependency on killing make him extremely dangerous. His trauma history and evidence of emotional growth under proper support make him profoundly tragic. An FBI profiler might classify him as a mission killer who won't stop. A clinical psychologist might classify him as a complex trauma survivor with maladaptive coping. A neuroscientist might classify him as someone whose brain was rewired by unbearable childhood experiences. All three would agree Dexter Morgan didn't have to become the Bay Harbor Butcher. He became that because every adult in his life who could have helped him made the wrong call. From the 7-year-old boy killing animals in the backyard to the 50-year-old man terrified of losing his son in Resurrection, Dexter's story isn't just a profile of a serial killer. It's a profile of what the system creates when it gives up on a traumatized child before they have a chance to heal. If this breakdown gave you a new perspective on Dexter Morgan, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on so you catch our next deep dive. And check out our previous video where we broke down whether Dexter Morgan was actually a psychopath or autistic, because that diagnosis changes everything about how you perceive Dexter.